You know, that feeling, right? That moment when you think you've got a pretty good handle on a topic. Maybe you even feel like, yeah, I know this stuff. You've seen the blockbusters, analyzed the big dramas, you think you understand cinema. But then one day you just stumble into this whole other world, a fascinating universe kind of hidden just beneath the surface of what you thought you knew.
Yeah.
Today, we're taking a deep dive, like head first, into one of those worlds, the realm of the B-movie, and maybe even a little bit beyond.
It's a journey a lot of film fans end up taking, often totally by accident. What sounds simple at first, the B in B-movie, I originally just meant it was the second film in a double feature, made super cheap.
Right, on a shoestring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it blossoms into something way more vibrant, way more influential, and often kind of paradoxical than most people realize. These aren't just like footnotes in film history. They're these strange powerhouses, creative proving grounds, and honestly, sources of some really unexpected fun.
Totally. So our mission today is to really unpack what B-movies are, how they evolved from those like incredibly humble beginnings into this creative frontier for so many filmmakers. And then this is where it gets really interesting. We're going to delve into the phenomenon of bad films.
Ah, yes. The bad film.
These are the movies so technically messed up, so artistically maybe misguided, so utterly unintentional in how they fall short, yet somehow they're profoundly enjoyable, they become legendary. These are the true so bad they're good movies. We want to explore the why behind this really unique appreciation and maybe what it tells us about how we consume film itself.
And for this deep dive, we've pulled together a real mix of sources to try and give you the full picture. We've got, classic film criticism for the historical context, some pretty detailed academic theses that really dig into what makes a film bad, but also kind of beloved. And we've even got direct, really candid interviews with contemporary B-movie filmmakers themselves. They give this rare glimpse into their passion, their struggles, the day-to-day realities of making these films today. It's a cool blend of theory and, like, boots-on-the-ground experience.
Okay, let's dive in then. Let's unpack this history. Our journey kicks off right in the heart of Hollywood's golden age, the 1930s and 40s. Back then, B-movie wasn't like an insult or anything.
Not at all.
It was purely functional, a classification. These were pretty much by definition low budget, churned out super fast, almost never had big stars or fancy effects or, huge sets.
Their whole purpose was just incredibly practical. They were the B picture in a double feature. The bonus movie you got with the main attraction, the A picture.
2 for 1.
Exactly. They had one ticket price, get 2 movies. It was a huge deal for audiences, especially during the Depression. Great value.
And the studios back then, they were smart. They turned this into a super efficient profit-making machine. They figured out they could just crank out these B films like an assembly line, minimal cost, keeping a steady stream of stuff hitting screens.
Take people in seats, get the money rolling. It was like a factory,
Yeah.
Quantity and quick turnover were key.
And they mostly stuck to specific genres, right? Made production easier, appealed to lots of people.
Oh, yeah. Lots of Westerns cheap to make. They already had the sets and costumes. Horror started popping up, early sci-fi, crime thrillers. And then you had the beginnings of exploitation films, too.
Exploitation.
Yeah, movies trying to lure people in with something sensational. Sex, drugs, monsters, whatever, push the envelope a bit, but always on a tight budget.
Okay, so the 30s and 40s set up the factory. Then the 50s and 60s, that's when things really took off, right? They went from just being the support act to like a whole sub-industry.
Absolutely. The whole culture was shifting. You had drive-in theaters popping up everywhere across America.
Oh, yeah, the drive-ins.
Huge. And they catered to this new audience, teenagers. Often looking for a cheap date night, something a little exciting, maybe a little forbidden.
And what did teenagers want?
Monsters and aliens. Exactly. So this shift fueled this massive boom in sci-fi and horror B-movies. Gave us some really iconic, even if low-budget stuff. Think about The Blob from '58.
It's goo.
Yeah. Or Creature from the Black Lagoon in '54. Instantly recognizable Gilman. These films kind of tapped into Cold War anxieties, atomic fears, fear of the unknown, all wrapped up in creature features that didn't cost a fortune to make.
And you can't talk about that era without mentioning Roger Corman. He's like the king of B-movies in a way.
Oh, absolutely essential. Corman was a true pioneer, a master of efficiency. He was known for making films unbelievably fast and on tiny budgets. The Little Shop of Horrors, famously shot in like 2 days and a night in 1960.
2 days? That's insane.
It is. And his other stuff, like the Gothic horror films with Vincent Price, like The Pit and the Pendulum in '61, They showed just how much creativity, atmosphere, even genuine scares you could squeeze out of severe limitations. He proved that constraints don't have to kill creativity, sometimes they actually ignite it.
That's such a powerful idea, isn't it? That limits can actually be fertile ground. Like, the less you have, the more you have to invent, find clever solutions that money usually just buys.
Precisely.
And what's really wild about Corman is he wasn't just making quick movies for cash. He was basically running an informal film school.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
He gave this crucial hands-on start to a whole bunch of future new wave directors who changed Hollywood. We're talking giants like Francis Ford Coppola. He worked for Corman on stuff like Dementia 13.
Right. And Scorsese. Martin Scorsese cut his teeth editing and directing for Corman, too.
It really was like a farm team, wasn't it? Or a junior league for the film industry.
Right.
Where future superstars learned the ropes, got practical experience right there in the trenches.
That farm team analogy really resonates, and our sources definitely emphasize it. These B movies, the whole independent scene, that's where the greats learn their skills, develop their talents, and practice their art. It's an environment that, well, it forces you to innovate with limited resources.
No big CGI budget back then.
Exactly. So they got incredibly creative with practical effects, clever camera angles, smart editing. This resourceful approach often led to these unique visual styles and storytelling techniques that got picked up later by mainstream cinema. It really shows how constraint can drive ingenuity.
And that innovation just kept rolling right into the 70s and 80s. The lines between B-movies and mainstream films started getting even blurrier. The old studio system was declining, which actually gave independent filmmakers more freedom to take risks, explore darker stuff.
This era saw low-budget films getting notorious for really intense horror, shocking visuals. Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre from '74 just redefined horror with that raw, almost documentary feel.
Terrifying. Still terrifying.
Oh, yeah. Or Wes Craven's The Hills Have Eyes in '77. These films didn't just solidify the slasher and exploitation genres. They dragged them right out of the fringes into the cultural conversation, inspiring countless mainstream horror movies for decades.
Then the 80s hit, and arguably the biggest game changer for B-movies arrived. Home video. VHS rentals.
Oh, massive.
Yeah.
Absolutely massive. Suddenly, these low-budget oddities once stuck in grindhouses or drive-ins could reach anyone with a VCR. You can just go to your local video store and rent some totally weird horror flick. It opened up everything.
And companies like Cannon Films became huge, right? Pumping out those cheap, over-the-top action movies.
Cannon was synonymous with that era. Chuck Norris, Charles Bronson. Just a flood of often ridiculous but super popular action and exploitation films. And then you had Troma Entertainment giving us stuff like The Toxic Avenger in '84.
Toxic.
Exactly. It just embodied that bizarre, campy, often grotesque vibe of '80s B cinema. Outrageous plot, crazy characters, that mix of dark humor and extreme violence.
But it wasn't all just gore and silliness. That period also gave us real cult classic that showed incredible filmmaking skill and dark humor, all on a budget. Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead from '81.
Groundbreaking. That dynamic camera work, the relentless scares, it basically birthed a subgenre.
Or Stuart Gordon's Reanimator in '85. Hilarious and horrifying. And Raimi, just like Corman's guys, is a perfect example. Started with this low-budget indie B-movie hit and then transitioned into directing massive blockbusters like Spider-Man.
Yeah, it proves those skills learned in the B-movie trenches are totally transferable to the biggest Hollywood stages.
So the legacy, the influence, it's just undeniable, right? It's woven into modern cinema.
Absolutely pervasive. They've been this deep well of ideas, a huge inspiration for new directors. Quentin Tarantino is maybe the most famous example, openly celebrating and borrowing from these older low-budget films, weaving their style into his own work.
He wears it on his sleeve.
Totally.
Yeah.
And their role in developing whole genres, especially horror and sci-fi, you just can't overstate it. So many tropes, creature designs, even story structures we take for granted now. They started or were refined in B-movies. It's foundational stuff.
It's amazing how they conjured up such memorable images and techniques with basically nothing. No big effects budgets, so they got clever with practical stuff, camera tricks that suggested more than they showed, sharp editing.
Resourcefulness. It led to unique styles that, got adopted and polished by bigger movies later. They pioneered things out of sheer necessity, and it became part of the language of film.
Which brings us to this really interesting idea from the sources, that maybe B movies, because they have to try harder with less money, can actually be more creative, more innovative, maybe even more entertaining than the big budget stuff sometimes.
It makes sense, right? They're natural labs for experimentation. And that intensity, that creativity, it builds these incredibly passionate fan bases. They keep these films alive through midnight screenings, conventions, websites. Yeah. And modern directors like Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez paid direct homage to the Grindhouse in 2007, lovingly recreating that whole double feature B-movie experience, fake trailers and all. It just shows their lasting appeal.
Okay, so we've traced this wild history of B-movies, resourceful, influential, but now we get to the really mind-bending part, don't we? Because beyond those scrappy B-movies, there's this other category. Films that are, well, let's be honest, objectively bad.
Technically flawed.
Yet we find ourselves completely captivated by them. How do we even start to understand that paradox? This is where bad film comes in the so bad they're good phenomenon.
This is where we need to talk about paracinema. And it's really important to get this. Paracinema isn't a genre like horror or sci-fi. It's not a filmmaking style either. It's described as a mode of reading, or maybe better, a conscious attitude of consumption. Basically, a counter-aesthetic.
Different way of watching.
Exactly. It involves actively celebrating all kinds of cinematic trash, taking films that were ignored or laughed at, and kind of elevating them, finding value beyond their trash status. And the key thing is, the enjoyment isn't despite the flaws.
Well, it's because of them.
Precisely. The flaws become the main attraction.
That's a crucial difference because it separates bad films from what we usually call cult cinema.
Yeah.
Like, think about David Lynch's Eraserhead or Romero's original Night of the Living Dead.
Right, classic cult films.
They were seen as niche or even trash by the mainstream at first, right? Midnight movies, underground stuff. But over time, they got reevaluated, and now they're widely seen as masterpieces. They were maybe misunderstood or ahead of their time. Their initial rejection wasn't about incompetence. It was about being different.
Exactly. But bad films, they're different. They're unmistakably artistic, aesthetic, technical failures. Their redemption isn't about being misunderstood. It's about highlighting their massive flaws as sources of, like, subversion and uniqueness. The sheer incompetence is the charm.
Okay, so how do we pin down what makes a bad film? Our sources lay out this really helpful three-step approach.
Yeah, it helps break down. Step one is the anatomy of technical failure. Basically, a fundamental lack of skill.
Just bad filmmaking.
Pretty much. Objective badness. Technical flaws coming from specific, unfavorable productional and skill-based traits. It's not deliberate rule-breaking for artistic effect. It's just not knowing how to do it right. Like an artist accidentally drawing a crooked line versus intentionally distorting perspective.
And often this is tied directly to budget and time, right?
Inextricably. Low budgets, rushed schedules, they almost guarantee you won't achieve your grand vision. Think about those exploitation flicks made in a few days. No money for good equipment, no time for rehearsals or multiple takes, maybe not even a skilled crew. So the flaws often come from just lacking resources, not necessarily bad ideas.
In the gold standard example here, the movie that basically defines so bad it's good has to be Ed Wood's Plan 9 from Outer Space, 1959.
Oh, Plan 9. The legend. It's the perfect case study. The list of failures is almost mythical.
Like Bela Lugosi dying mid-production and being replaced by Ed Wood's chiropractor, Tom Mason.
Who's clearly taller and just holds a cape over his face the whole time.
It's incredible. Plus, the wooden acting actors clearly reading lines off cards sometimes.
Yep. The nonsensical script that makes zero logical sense.
Boom mics dipping into frame all the time.
The lighting jumping from day to night in the same scene.
Scratched stock footage for explosions.
And UFOs that are literally hubcaps on strings. It's just chef's kiss of badness.
Plan 9 is like the masterpiece of incompetence because it shows Wood's huge ambition just crashing against his lack of actual skill.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just Plan 9. Bad acting is a staple. Good acting, believable, realistic, creates a character. Bad acting is often wooden, stilted, completely unbelievable.
But there's something fascinating about watching a truly bad actor tackle a truly bad script.
Right. The sheer excess of it, whether it's over-the-top melodrama or just a complete inability to show any emotion, makes these performances unforgettable in their absurdity. It creates this huge gap, this rift between intention and execution. They're trying so hard and failing so spectacularly.
Then there's the dialogue. Often uncanny, bizarre, idiosyncratic. Sometimes it's hilariously over-the-top exposition characters just saying things we can already see.
Or worse, narrating images, or even lying about what's on screen. Sometimes you get that all-knowing narrator trying to patch plot holes, but maybe contradicting what we're actually seeing.
It just shatters the illusion, right? The theorists call it diegesis. It's like watching a magic trick and suddenly seeing the wires.
Totally pulls you out. The dialogue forces you to see the artificiality. Same with poor sound design. Inappropriate music clashing with the scene's mood.
Like happy music during a death scene?
Could be. Or sound effects that don't match tiny punch, huge explosion sound, weird voiceovers. And sync errors are huge mouths moving out of time with the audio. Classic sign of rushed work or bad dubbing.
Again, it just shatters that illusion, pulls you right out of the movie. You can't not notice it.
And the editing. Good editing is invisible, creating a smooth flow, making sense of space and time. Bad film editing is inappropriately visible. It fails to tell the story coherently.
Jarring cuts.
Mismatched shots, yeah. Obvious overused stock footage. It would love that to save money. Continuity errors everywhere, someone's clothes change mid-scene, hair suddenly different.
It's especially weird when an edit is almost right, but just subtly wrong.
Oh yeah, that's the best. It doesn't feel like an artistic choice. It just screams negligence and incompetence, like they didn't even check.
And it's not always about having no money, is it? The sources mention budgetary anomaly.
Right. Compare that. A 71 exploitation film made for maybe $75,000 classic low-budget flaws. Then look at Tommy Wiseau's The Room from 2003. That had a reported $6 million budget.
$6 million.
Yep. And it suffers from bizarre direction, baffling story choices, famously terrible acting, issues more about the incompetent auteur, even though the actual shooting and lighting look pretty competent. So failure can come from lack of funds or just artistic blindness.
Okay, that leads perfectly into the second step in defining a bad film. When intent fails, or a failure of intent and a lack of self-awareness. This feels like the absolute heart of it.
It really is the core of the paradox. The enjoyment comes from seeing that highly specific intent and failed execution become bizarrely humorous. It's all about the gap between what they tried to do and what actually ended up on screen.
It's the sincerity of the failure.
Exactly. The sincere and pathetic nature makes it compelling. It's earnest, but misguided. It's endearing and frustrating, charming and embarrassing, good and bad, all mixed together.
And as an audience member, you're constantly asking, what were they thinking?
What possessed them to do this?
Yeah.
Is this meant to be this bad?
And the humor really depends on knowing they weren't in on the joke, right?
Crucially, it relies on acknowledging the creator's failures, not some deliberate wink-wink subversion. They tried their absolute best, were completely serious, and failed spectacularly. That's why it's so funny.
Okay, so we've dissected the bad film. Now, how do we actually appreciate them? The art of watching. This brings us to step 3, the participatory mode of viewership.
Yeah, this is not passive viewing at all. It's a conscious effort, almost an active cinemasochism.
Cinemasochism, love that.
Think about watching a truly awful movie. You're squirming, maybe groaning, but you absolutely cannot look away. In fact, you're leaning in, almost daring it to get worse. That's the active part. It turns you from passive observer to active participant.
You're working with the film almost.
You really are. You're constantly questioning what you were seeing and referring to your previous experiences to try and explain what is happening on screen. You're trying to make sense of the nonsense, filling gaps. It becomes this weirdly engaging puzzle.
And to really get it, you need that cultural capital the sources talk about.
Basically, you need to have seen enough movies, understood enough about how they're supposed to work, to recognize when the rules are being hilariously broken. You need that background, that intertextual knowledge of film conventions.
Otherwise, you might just think it's junk.
Exactly. A newcomer might just dismiss it as trash and switch off. The enjoyment is largely cumulative. You build up your understanding of bad good by watching more films, recognizing the patterns of failure, seeing the accidental artistry.
Like Umberto Eco said about cult films needing that intertextual knowledge. If you don't know the rules being broken, how can you enjoy the break?
Precisely. Makes it tough for newcomers. They lack the framework to contextualize the errors and find the fun in them.
So McCoy and Scarborough outline these 4 modes of viewing, which helps explain how different people engage. First is traditional viewing style.
The default mode. Taking the film at face value, judging by normal standards, which, for a bad film, means
Dismissal. This is just bad.
Right. Artistical failure. Turn it off. Standard reaction for someone not initiated into paracinema.
Then there's the ironic viewing mode. This feels very common.
Super common, especially with cult and paracinema fans. Enjoying trash through ironic distance and derisive mockery. You're laughing at the film, the actors, the director, often done communally.
Like riffing with friends, shouting at the screen, making memes.
Exactly. It's a shared performance. Enhances the fun for those in the know, but can totally alienate people who don't get the jokes or the context. It still needs that cultural capital.
Okay, then things get a bit more nuanced with camp sensibilities.
Yeah, this is different from pure irony. It approaches admiration, appreciating the exaggeration, the style over substance. You're kind of laughing with the film, finding a weird beauty in its failures, seeing the flaws as maybe passionate and truthful versions of cinema.
Like Susan Sontag's notes on camp, that love of the unnatural, of artifice and exaggeration.
Exactly that. Appreciating the over-the-top, the stylized, even when it's completely sincere. It's the earnestness of the failed attempt that resonates.
And finally, the one we've probably all felt, the guilty pleasure.
Oh yeah, often a hidden private viewing. Feeling actual guilt and shame for enjoying something you know is objectively bad, but you just can't stop watching.
Right, rubbernecking at a train wreck.
That exact feeling. The shame comes from that clash enjoying acknowledged trash. You feel you shouldn't like it, but you totally do.
But then there's this intriguing fifth mode from Matteo Stecchetti. Critical subjectivity. This sounds more intellectual.
It is. It's a deeper approach that questions the governing powers of the culture industry, the institutions telling us what's good or bad. Instead of asking, why do critics hate this? It asks, why do I dislike this?
Interesting shift.
It encourages embracing your own gut reactions, resisting industry hype, thinking for yourself, understanding how the culture industry shapes our tastes, often without us realizing it.
So ultimately, what's the big takeaway from appreciating paracinema and bad films?
The ultimate merit. It's this powerful reminder that film is a craft, and that it is us humans that are the wielders of this craft, not a corporate machine.
Yeah.
As one source brilliantly puts it, nothing makes that clearer than a complete failure.
Wow. Yeah.
It just pulls back the curtain, shows the human effort, the flaws, everything. Makes you appreciate the skill that goes into even a good film.
It really is all about the craft, which leads us perfectly to the filmmakers actually making B-movies today. We asked several of them, why do this now? Especially when technology seems to make better quality more accessible.
And a really common answer from filmmakers like Sean Burkett and M.J. Dixon was creative freedom. They talk about B-movies offering untethered creativity because there's less money at stake.
No big studio breathing down their necks.
Exactly. No demands to please everyone or satisfy investors. So they can get away with more gore, more sex, without the restrictions of the MPAA, which often limits mainstream movies. Some even think, maybe controversially, that better stories are found in B-movie land because they can just tell the story they want to tell, no matter how niche or wild.
Makes sense. Less pressure, more freedom to push boundaries. They also mentioned genre accessibility, right?
Big factor. Horror and action are seen as an easier way to break into the film business because, well, people always love horror. And in these films, the monster becomes the star.
So you don't need big-name actors.
Right. It gives lesser-known actors a leg up. The audience is there for the scares, the spectacle, and genre makes the film instantly sellable. In today's crowded market, that's huge for getting noticed. Horror especially has that built-in audience always looking for more, reliable entry point.
But that freedom definitely comes with challenges. Funding must be a nightmare.
Oh yeah. Filmmakers like B.J. McDonnell and Sean Burkett call it a constant struggle to do epic things with no money. They rely heavily on crowdfunding.
Building that audience early.
Yep. Government initiatives like New Brunswick's 30% rebate for local spending.
Yeah.
And honestly, just calling in tons of favors from friends, colleagues, local businesses. It's pure hustle.
Takes incredible dedication. M.J. Dixon said it took him, 9 films to really start seeing a financial return?
9 feature films. It forces you to think fast, solve problems constantly, be incredibly prepared because those shooting schedules are brutal. No budget to reshoot, no time for mistakes. You learn to be resourceful, flexible, just utterly determined. Failure isn't really an option.
How do they deal with reviews and critics? Must be tough.
It's complex, mixed feelings. Some, like Dixon and Burkett, value constructive criticism from reviewers they trust, see it as a chance to improve. Others just learn to tune out the negativity. You can't please everyone. Their niche audience might love it even if critics don't.
And they often feel critics just don't get the reality of indie filmmaking right.
That's a huge complaint, and totally valid. B.J. McDonnell gave that example. Rain ruins your big outdoor finale shoot. On an indie budget, you probably can't afford to come back tomorrow or rebuild the set inside. So the film goes out with that compromise, and critics might slam it, having no idea about the insane challenges behind it.
So you develop a thick skin.
You have to. Become philosophical. Realize some viewers just don't get, it's a B-movie, made with passion and grit, not unlimited cash. Take it with a grain of salt, knowing the battle you fought just to finish it.
What about moral responsibility? They often work in genres with controversial stuff, gore, sex.
They think about it. Richard McQueen said he avoids exploitation and excessive violence. Doesn't want to be just the B-movie guy known for gratuitous stuff.
Sean Burkett sees his work more as escapism, wants people to forget about the bills for a bit. He thinks audiences are pretty desensitized now, so gore and nudity don't have a huge effect on behavior.
B.J. McDonnell thinks gore is vital for horror, values the craft of practical effects. But nudity needs to be tasteful, serve the story, not just bait the audience. And he draws a line, refuses to direct rape scenes.
M.J. Dixon acknowledges film affects people like any art, but ultimately viewers have to take responsibility. He thinks gratuitousness turns film into pornography. And while film can influence, the real triggers for harmful acts are probably deeper elsewhere in someone's life.
So the general vibe, despite different views, is avoid censorship, let the art speak, trust the audience to engage critically.
So what's the future look like for B-movies and these filmmakers? Can they survive against the streaming giants and franchises?
There's optimism mixed with realism. Sean Burkett pointed out his indie horror, Don't Fuck in the Woods, actually outranks Spider-Man. Homecoming on IMDb's charts at one point shows indies can compete digitally as people discover stuff online. That digital space levels the field a bit.
But M.J. Dixon had a different take.
Yeah, more nuanced. He thinks the days of B-movies becoming more mainstream are at an end for the films themselves crossing over big time. Instead, he sees talented B-movie creatives getting pulled into bigger franchises. Hollywood wants their ingenuity, their low-budget problem-solving skills.
Interesting. Like they're absorbing the talent, not the films.
Kind of. He even anticipates films may be becoming free on streaming eventually, with creators earning money from merch, direct support like Patreon, like the music industry.
So ultimately, it's still about the art.
For these filmmakers, yeah. Primarily artistry, audience enjoyment. Like B.J. McDonnell said, make people smile and jump when scared. Provide that experience. Making a living is the goal, sure, but often secondary to the passion. And there's that legacy idea McDonnell mentioned. Your hard work will last through history. They're making something they hope endures, gets discovered later.
What a journey. From B pictures filling out a double bill to this vibrant experimental space, shaping genres, launching careers.
Influencing everything. And then diving into the bad film paradox, where technical failure becomes this source of bizarre humor, unique enjoyment, defined by that lack of skill, that earnest failed intent, and how it demands us, the viewers, to watch differently.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Appreciating B movies, bad films. It's not just about finding weird entertainment or laughing at mistakes. It's about really getting a deeper feel for filmmaking craft, how audiences connect with movies in different ways, even the economics and pressures behind the scenes.
Yeah, it pushes you to think critically, question your own ideas about good and bad taste. It reminds you that art, all art, is deeply human. It can fail gloriously, succeed unexpectedly, sometimes in the exact same moment.
It's true. If mainstream movies try so hard to be invisible, to make us forget we're watching a movie, maybe the totally visible failure of a bad film is its greatest success.
Because it forces us to engage, to think, to see the human hand, limitations and all, behind the curtain.
Exactly. So maybe think about this. What other failures out there in art, maybe even in life, might hold unexpected lessons or insights or even real joy if we just changed how we looked at them? Something to chew on.